couple panel members who are going to be trickling in, and hopefully we have some more attendees that are trickling in. We'll keep it kind of casual. We're all family here at Student Affairs. Please help yourself to the coffee and the tea. I'm told the coffee is deliciously strong. So I'm not a coffee drinker. I got a lot of thumbs up, so good job, Billy, because you got a lot of people who are fans of your coffee. Welcome. It's Careers in Student Affairs Month. Yay, collective, right? Yeah? So who did not realize that we actually had a month dedicated to our profession? Good. That's awesome. Oh, we got one. That's okay. That's good. That's good. So we do have an entire month, October, to celebrate student affairs. And what we do, I think a lot of us, when we're on different committees, when we're with our faculty counterparts, sometimes it's easy to feel as though everything about the college has to do within the classroom. But we are the experts about everything outside the classroom and so much more of the experience and how the students are applying the things that they learn. We're helping them get where they need to go. Dr. Clayton, I'm going to pick on her even though she's not here. I love it. I don't know if anybody's seen some of her presentations talking about the pedagogy that we have and kind of justifying why we get to do what we do. It's really fun to be in the room. Do we have any faculty in the room right now? Awesome. We get to talk about them. But when you have them in the room, it's really nice when you hear her presentation talking about everything that we do, all the research and hours that goes into it for our field. This is something that we get to actually say thank you and to celebrate what we do, and we're actually going to be able to give you guys the inside scoop. So how many here have been always wanting to know what was maybe discussed on a hiring panel when you weren't in the room? Yeah, like inside scoop, exactly. Or kind of knowing maybe what it is that you do really well that makes you stand out, but you don't always want to ask. Maybe something you could be working on. That is what this is about. This is all about welcome, welcome. Do you know one? Just come. Please come on in. We already know it's casual. We're all coming in and trickling. But that's what this is about. This is to give you the inside scoop. And so you guys can ask questions. We're going to get a lot of great insight from our panel, which I'll introduce in just a moment. But I want you all to be thinking about questions that you've always wished that you could ask and maybe never had. I also want you to be thinking about the fact that it was very easy to get this wonderful panel here because our field and we actually have, great ambassadors for the field. Our field is about paying it forward and helping people along. That's what we all do in this room. Our leadership is no different from that. Be thinking about that. Be thinking about your colleagues and how helpful everybody is for each other, how generous our leadership is, and start thinking about if you don't have a mentor already, these are things that you can continue on. Some of the people up here actually on this panel have been my personal mentors. And that's been something that I haven't necessarily even had to ask for. It's just happened. Some I have. Please be open to that with each other. That's what all of this is going to be about, is celebrating. Who attended any of our other events for this month? Any of our webinars that we had going on? Did you guys like those? Yes. Awesome, awesome. That, I'm actually going to turn that over and give a lot of credit. David was able to arrange that through NASPA. Actually, some of us got to go to NASPA in Kansas. Is anybody a member of NASPA at all? Phenomenal organization. I'm going to put in a plug that there's a lot of resources that you can use. The webinars came from there. If you missed some of the webinars, we encourage you to get involved with NASPA and look up a lot of their information. If you need help, please contact any of our committee members, which I'm going to give a shout out because I am just the person that was elected to stand up here, but I had a whole big group. Christina Urson, Mary Glenn, David Adams, Scott Manis, and Billy Barrett Silva. Raise your hands. Okay. They put on this whole month worth of events for us, and we actually have more to come. Who has signed up for Quality Time and Careers in Mind so far? Oh, come on, y'all. There's still spaces left. This is awesome. So we're getting an inside scoop from a panel. That is your opportunity to get one-on-one time with some of our leadership and really get to know what it is that they do, how they got to their current positions, maybe tips that they might have for you. So please, emails went out. Sign up for that. We also have professional development funds up to $700 if you guys have a project that you want to work for. So all of this has been arranged. Dr. Clayton was very passionate about Careers in Student Affairs Month and let us do all of these programs together. So please take full advantage of them. On your seats, you should have bios. I will not read all the bios for you because I want to save time to make sure we have questions. But I want you all to know that we have a panel of superstars before us. And these bios are just a little thimble out of a bucket full of experience that each of them have. I'm going to introduce our panel right now, and I'm going to keep this because everybody's titles keeps changing on me. I'm looking at you, Karen Harmon. So I can make sure that I'm saying all the titles correctly. So we'll start at the far end. Dr. Harriet Dudley is the Dean of Student Affairs at Metro Campus. Karen Harmon is the Director of Military Support Services and Special Programs, and also the Interim Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Did I get that right?
As far as I can tell.
Heck yeah, all right. And then we have Eileen Kenny, who's the Assistant VP of Enrollment Management. Jose Dela Cruz, Dean of Student Affairs at Northeast Campus. Terry Alonzo is the Dean of Student Affairs at Southeast Campus. We have Shelly Davidson, who's our bursar housed at Southeast, but is bursar for the entire college. We also have, where are you, Jenny? Jenny Beatty, who is the Dean of Student Affairs at West Campus, and later on we'll have Dr. Jan Clayton, who is our Senior Student Affairs Officer, SSAO. What was it? I'm sorry? Oh, she's walking in right now. Speak it, and she just apparates when you do that. How nice is that? She's going to try and sneak in the back, and we're going to all we're going to call her out on it. So what we have, actually, we have a great presentation, but it's going to be made even more great by your participation. So you have iPads that are kind of scattered around, and there's 4 up here on the front. Please feel free to use those. You can also use your cell phones if you want. Bear with us. We all know the Wi-Fi can be kind of tricky at times, but I have been assured, Scott also wanted to make a plug, there is no tracking data through this site at all if you use your phones. They're not going to be taking any data or cookies or tracking it. It's not going to do anything like that, so please feel welcome. The website is at the top. All you have to do as you think of questions, I'll try and pause periodically to look at what questions we have. I'm going to ask Scott to look at this because your text came up instead of so Scott's my IT guy. But please, if you have questions that you want to ask, feel free to text those in. It's going to alert me, and then we'll be able to ask those. You are welcome to ask it of a specific panel member, but I ask if you wanted me to ask it of a specific person, please say that so I know who to ask it of. Or if you have questions that you want for the panel at large, we can also do that. Send them throughout the entire thing. We'll just kind of keep this organic. To get us started, we did give the panel some idea of some of the questions we thought that they would ask, but ultimately they're going to have a lot of surprises. But there were a couple of themes on some of the questions and suggestions that we were having from the group. So we're going to start off with a panel at large. You all can answer in a row, you can answer all together, however you want to do it. Not everybody has to, but the first question that we're going to have to kick us off is, what advice would you give the audience on how to prepare to take on a leadership role? Anybody can jump in that wants to. I don't have any buzzers, I'm sorry.
She can't wait.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so, I was trying to, listening is good. That's some advice. So I try to practice what I preach. Be the person in the room that does listen. Be the person in the room that's visible, that's approachable. Work the room, network. If you come to a meeting or you come to an event, make sure you speak to everybody you know, and if you don't know folks, go up and speak to them too. I love Lauren Brookie, because she always says, remind me of your name again. And whether she knows your name or not, you feel like that she knows you and that you're important, you're there. So I would say that. I would also say, know the competencies for community colleges. So for community college leaders, there is the American Association for Community Colleges. That is our overarching umbrella, and they have 5 competencies for emerging new CEOs and existing leaders. And those competencies are resource management, organizational strategy, collaboration, communication, and community college advocacy. So knowing the lingo, the vernacular of the trade, working your network, building your network, being visible, being approachable, knowing what your strengths are. Some people are still doing Myers-Briggs. Some people are doing DISC profile. I know Mary's in the room, and she, I believe, has the rights for the DISC profile. I did Strengths Finder, so I know what my strengths are, and I work toward that. I'm woo and I'm positivity, and so I work that angle. So, and then just don't be afraid to take a risk. Don't be afraid to be your authentic self. Don't be afraid to look for joy in everything that you do. And you can lead from any level. You can lead from anywhere.
Is anybody surprised that Dr. Dudley is a woo? No, no. Would anybody else like to take the question? I'll repeat it just in case too. What advice would you give the audience on how to prepare to take on a leadership role?
I'd like to add to that by saying don't be afraid to expand your experience. Look outside the role you're currently in. And I like what you said when you were doing the introductions. You take on opportunities. Don't see it as just something else or a burden, but look at it as a learning opportunity. Expand your horizons. Get out in the community as well, and especially since we're a community college. We can do a world of good, gain all sorts of experience by doing those things, and all of those help you to build leadership. Real leadership is about helping other people to succeed. It's about helping them, as Harriet just said, to be their authentic self, but still be able to understand systems and be able to help others improve and be their best selves.
Thank you. Would anybody else from the panel care to take it?
I think being a really great team player is important. So if you think about all the teams you're on, if you think about the groups you're in, be that person who is a great team player. As you think about advancing, as all of us think about advancing, no one wants to bring someone onto their team who isn't known for being someone who's going to be a collaborator and someone who's going to be easy to work with. So I think that that's a key, is just to do your part. You know, when you're on a team, do your part, communicate well, do what you say you're going to do, and follow through with the things that you've been asked to do.
This one, I'm going to ask the whole panel completely selfishly because they have to answer because I'm up here. I'm going to ask, and this is kind of a two-part, so, and anybody can answer this. What impresses you the most when you consider hiring someone? Or what is the most important factor for you when you consider hiring someone? In case there's anybody job searching out here.
I'm happy to jump in on that. The first thing for me, and it's going to be different for everybody, but for me it starts with integrity. So I don't necessarily care about what your skill set is if I don't think you're going to operate in a way that is true to our mission or our core values. So honestly, I'm looking for integrity. What do others say about you? You know, what's your reputation? You know, what do you demonstrate with your actions? After that, you know, competency, by the way, is implied. If you're looking at somebody in the first place, it's already implied. So for me, I think that's huge. And it's going to be very different from leader to leader, person to person. The other thing that I know about leadership, that's why I was going to tag into the first question, is that it is situational and it is very diverse in what it looks like. So I don't think you have to feel like there's one model of leadership. There are all types of models of leadership, and they're effective at different times and different places for different reasons. But that, for me, that's where I start.
Thank you. We do have a question that came in, so I'm going to actually put a spin on it and ask, do any of our panel members identify as being an introvert? We do, okay. Eileen, how about I throw this one to you? From our audience, what advice do you have for an introvert being more assertive in their career? So as an introvert and being able to climb up the ladder, what advice would you have?
Sure. So I'm a true introvert. On the Myers-Briggs, taken it tons of times, and always score on. I'm a strong I. Similarly to what Dr. Clayton said about leadership being situational, I also think that my introvertness, is that a word? Did I just make up a word? My introvertedness is situational. Because I think I can get up and talk in front of a crowd. I can give a presentation. To Dr. Dudley's point, I can work a room when I have to, when it is part of my job, but it is not natural to me. I have to prepare myself for it. And I actually role play. This may sound kind of weird, but there are times when I know that I'm going to be walking into a situation or have some sort of meeting, and I will have somebody, a trusted person in my circle, sit down and play and talk about and role play so that I know maybe how things are coming across, because it can be very difficult for me to put myself out there and be upfront in front of people and eloquent, as my stammering sometimes will tell you.
Thank you.
I would like to add that, well, first of all, I've been in the room with Eileen, and we've done the same thing for each other. Before a presentation, we bounce off each other. Here's what I'm going to say. Is this okay? But I also want to add that as an introvert and as a leader, it's important for you to take the moments to re-energize that you need, so that quiet time, that time away from the conversation, the computer screen, and whatever is happening. So I've had to actually make an effort, and sometimes I fail on a daily basis, to keep that time or build in that alone time where I re-energize myself. So that's important for eyes. And there's a book called The Eyes Have It, and I think I would recommend that book for student affairs leaders.
Thank you.
Can I just
Yes, please.
add to that, because it's important to get definitions of introvert versus extrovert and what that means. I think people tend to equate that with shyness. When I was younger, I was a shy child, but it's really important to distinguish the difference. I have so many people that want to argue me left and right that I'm not an introvert, because the nature of the job I have requires me to speak on a regular basis. And to be honest, the lens that I'm able to use is I am an advocate. And so when I know that it's my responsibility to use my voice for people who don't have the opportunity to have their voice heard, then it's not about me, and that's something that I'm able to do. But I have to, as Terry said, re-energize and renew by going away and doing those things in solitude. But just to give you an example, Barack Obama is an introvert. And so if anything about his leadership has stuck out to you in a positive way, he might not be the person you think of as an I, but that's exactly what he is. And if you do some of the research and look at some of the famous people that are I's, you might be surprised, but it's because it's really about where you draw your energy from. Do you draw your energy from the opportunity to kind of be alone and contemplate and have some solitude, or do you draw your energy from people and energy and ideas all around you? So I think if you're sitting out there, whether you're I or an E, it's been demonstrated that both perspectives make for great leaders. So don't discount yourself if you're an I. And, you know, much needs to be understood about E's, because E's are very thoughtful, effective leaders, and sometimes people don't give E's credit for that, and they just think, well, it's easy for you, that's something that you're really good at doing, that kind of thing. And so, you know, just do some research on both I and E.
Thank you.
I'd like to add just a little bit to that. Regarding my Myers-Briggs, I'm a balance of an I and an E in TJ. There are times where I let my I take over my E, and that's situational for me. The way I balance the two is that when I'm in a new situation or in a new environment, most would quickly read me as being an introvert, but that may not necessarily be true, because when I enter into a new environment or a situation, I allow myself some time to scan the environment to see what the norms are for that specific situation or that particular environment. If it's a new meeting or if it's a new social gathering, I want to make sure that I fully understand how the group is interacting. And then once I have a better understanding of that, that's when my E kicks in, and that gives me ability to network a little bit more effectively, to know who I should approach and introduce myself to. And from a leadership perspective, I think that's also important. That's one of the things I really gained when I was at the state regents, with the state regents. There are no one situation is the same. Introducing someone that's new to a group can quickly change the dynamics and how the work is accomplished to the group. So that's something that I also encourage you to do. If you're one of those that quickly goes in and you're just, all E, it may be best in certain situations to kind of pull back, read the room first to see how it's best to approach the individuals within that situation. So that's what's helped me the most.
Was that directed at me directly? Was that what that was?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Dean Delacruz likes being trapped in an airport with me when I'm really bored and making up games. Actually, I've got a good one. We'll keep this going with Dean Delacruz. When applying for your current position, how did you set yourself apart from others who wanted the same job?
I think it's not something specific that I did to set me apart from the other candidates. I let my expertise, I let my level of education, and I let myself speak on its behalf. One of the things that I always try to do is I try to utilize the skills that I've learned from all those around me and try to just demonstrate it in a very authentic way. Often, some of us in the room may have sat on interview panels where the live person in front of you that you're interviewing doesn't necessarily match what they place on paper. So that I want to always make sure that when I'm presenting myself for a new position, that the two are very consistent. Because as we grow within our profession, we look for things like that, because then it gives us a level of question of whether this person is truly who they say they are. And I always make sure that people are aware that I'm first generation. I come from a rural community. That within itself has its advantages and its benefits from an educational and a professional perspective, especially when we're working on a community college campus, because those are our students. They may not be as rural as I am, but we do have some at some of our campuses that are. So I think just being honest and knowing who you truly are and not being afraid of demonstrating your weaknesses. That's one of the things that was asked when I was interviewed is, please identify one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses. And I was very honest. And when I had a conversation with Jan, I told her that it was no surprise to her, but I operate very quickly. And I understand that not others may work as fast as I do and process things as quickly as I do, and I'm respectful of that, because that just means that they process things a little bit differently than I do, which may be a benefit and a strength for them that adds to my ability to perform my work. So I always try to remember my weaknesses so that I'm constantly aware of that, so I know that I need to slow down when I'm around others, because they may not be as fast-paced as I am.
Thank you. This one's going to be for Shelley. What attracts you to being in a position of leadership?
I think the ability to affect change. I spent 30 years in the corporate world, and I will say it's never too late to get your dream job, because this was something I wanted to do when I was in college a long time ago. So it's never too late, and go be where the action's happening. If you see change and you think it's a good change, you need to get behind that and pursue it. And I think that's why being a leader is fun, because you have that opportunity. And if you're wanting to strive to be, then get on the committees, be a part of those, and the leaders notice that, and I think that's where I see people that I think, oh, you're going to go someplace, and even in the corporate world you see that, but I think it's especially true in education because things are changing all the time.
Thank you. This is going to be a question for the panel at large, and this is coming from our audience. Talk a little about transitioning to a new position. How do you know that it's time to transition to this new role?
I'm certainly happy to take that one coming from academic affairs. So, a couple of things. I remember being told once by the president of Spelman College to leave when people still want you to stay. So, knowing yourself and understanding where you are, there's a thing called, there's a book, and I can't think of the author, but it's the first 90 days. And it talks about how long it takes you to learn about the organization and the role, and then perform or give results. And then where do you go from there? Like, do you start on the decline? Once you maximize that, once those two things intersect, where do you go from there? So you look for new projects, you look for new challenges, you look for new opportunities. For me, I had been in higher ed as a faculty since 2000, so in 2018, I had been in it for 18 years on the academic affairs side. So teaching, department chair, program coordinator, and then dean. And it really was, I had done what I came to do, which, as Karen talked about, lift people up. Every institution I was at, I was able to be a full partner with internal and external stakeholders to bring about student success, to hire alums, to help people get higher roles. I had been a full partner with the team, as Jenny alluded to make some things happen for others and to bring about some new projects. So it really was time, and I had plateaued. I was very comfortable where I was, and I was very, and you might call it cocky. So I was like, I know this, I've got this, I've done this and done it well, and it's been recognized and acknowledged that I do it well. And that was a humbling thing to say, okay, are you going to ride it out on this success, or are you going to do what you encourage students to do all the time? Take a risk, do something different, come outside of your comfort zone, see what you have that's transferable, look for a new place, a new opportunity to serve and to help. And so with that in mind, I looked at Dean of Student Affairs and kind of just looked at it, had some conversations with some folks, and really got excited about the opportunity. So I would just say, you have to know within yourself when you've reached your plateau or you are looking to do something else to challenge yourself. That's how it was for me.
Thank you. We'll do this one for Dean Beatty. What was your first win that made you confident that you were on the right career path?
So that was a long, long time ago. I started out in residence life a long time ago at Iowa State University. And when I was there, I was an RA. So this was way back when I was an undergraduate student. And I was asked to take on a role in our mailroom. And so I took on that role, and I actually applied for the position in the mailroom in the residence hall. And the hall director, within about a month, so there were several people who worked in this mailroom, and within about a month of me joining the team, the manager, I guess, of the mailroom, it was a fellow student, left for whatever reason. And the hall director said, "You're going to be my next manager." And I said, "I've only been here, like in the mailroom." Now, it wasn't rocket science, but I had only been there a month, and there were people who had, seniority over me and things like that. And she said, I just know that you've got this. And the following year, they were interviewing for RAs. I didn't apply because I didn't think I could ever do anything like that. And she came to me and she said, "I don't care if you apply or not, you're going to be an RA." And so she had that confidence in me that I didn't really know was there. I didn't even know you could do this as a career. And then when it came time for me to graduate, she said, "So what are you going to do next year?" I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to go teach English." I mean, I had an English degree and I was student teaching. And she said, "I think you need to go to grad school and do student affairs." And I said, "You can get paid to do this?" Like, I didn't have my head wrapped around that. I'm a first generation college student from a farming community. No one I knew had a college degree. Everyone was a farmer. And so my experience with what opportunities were out there was pretty limited. When I went to college, I thought I had to pick a degree or a major that was something I took in high school. So in my small high school, I thought, well, I guess I'm the best at English. I guess that's what I'll major in. And that's how I chose my major. And so it was having someone else have confidence in me. And then, once I realized that my residents really felt a connection to me and things like that. And I think, so that's when I really realized it was very early on, very early.
Do we have any other housing res life people? No? Is it a similar story for you, Terry? It was for me. I mean, all right, yeah. See, you should have been RAs. It was a straight shot. Hey. This question's going to be for Eileen. Do you feel that leadership can be taught, or do you feel as though it's something that one is naturally born with?
Can I say both?
Yes, if you justify it.
I think it can absolutely be taught, but I think that the person needs to be willing to accept the guidance, the feedback, the mentoring that goes along with that. I think if you can find someone who can help guide and bring out your talents, you are so fortunate. Not all of us have had that, and it can make a huge difference in one's success. But I mean, I think when you see children, you see some who are naturally willing to kind of put themselves out there, and that can be cultivated, and that talent can be cultivated. I don't know whether to go down this path or not. I think this was one of the questions that we were sent as possible questions in terms of natural leadership, and do I think I'm a natural leader? Not necessarily, because I tend to be kind of, again, quiet and reserved in my natural personal life. And I think often when we're growing up as women, and it's not necessarily, it's much better now, but it wasn't at the time necessarily something that was, if you kind of put yourself out there, you could be, or tried to take charge, you could be labeled bossy. And so I have had the word bossy thrown at me as a child. And so you learn those things pretty quickly, that perhaps that's not the way to go, and to temper that just a little bit. And so I think things are much, much better now, and I think that's recognized when we are looking at the differences between male and female and all of this. But I think it can be both. I think absolutely somebody can be guided and taught and mentored to take on leadership responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have anybody who feels like it's one way or the other, natural or learned in the audience? No? No comments. Dead fish. That's okay. It's okay. We will turn next over to Karen Harmon. What skills do you find you use most often in your leadership roles?
I think probably, excuse me, my throat's messing up today. I think probably the most important skill a person can have in a leadership position is patience. And I think Harriet alluded earlier to being a listener, to really listening, being in the moment, not thinking ahead as to what you're going to say, so that people feel listened to. Because no matter what the problem, most of the time, it can be moved forward in a positive way by genuinely listening. And also by having the attitude that it could be a better perspective that that person is sharing with you. So for me, true leadership is about, again, helping to lift people up to be their best selves. And in order to do that, you have to be a good listener. And then I want to throw in that other part again, patience. We're all very human. And being human, I think we can all say, is a pretty rough road sometimes, right? So those, I would say, are two of the top things.
Thank you. Dean Alonzo, what suggestions do you have for fast-tracking one's career?
Fast track. Fast track. Let's see. Well, I think, you need to always feel that you're operating at 100% and always interviewing. Every day is an interview, that concept, and so understanding, what are the skills I need to move forward, watching people you admire and look up to who might be mentors. What did they do to make sure that they were able to fast track, or if they made mistakes and they are willing to share those with you, listen to those mistakes. I've shared quite a few of mine with people who I've mentored just to help them, try to go this way rather than that way. And I think it helps, but really just making sure that you're in your heart, you're here, you enjoy this position and you want to do your best and you want to make it better if you can, and offer solutions all the time when there are challenges, because there are challenges. You have to choose to find a solution or to help be part of the solution versus part of the problem. So those are things that I would recommend. And then, of course, taking the risk to put yourself out there for a position. Sometimes you don't feel ready, but you want to pursue it and you really have the ambition. It's okay to put yourself out there and apply and go through the interview process. That experience alone is going to help you for the next time you apply for a position. So be willing to, do the application thoroughly and accurately, making sure you shine on paper, as Jose mentioned, but also shine yourself and be at an interview every day.
Absolutely.
I'll add one thing to that, Hutch. I think Terry just landed on something that is very important. One time, many years ago, when I was working at OSU, I applied for a position that I was in no way qualified for. I mean, just did not meet the minimum qualifications, but nonetheless wanted them to know that I was interested in advancing. So I, submitted all my stuff, and I got back the nicest note from the head of the search committee, and they did not interview me. I mean, and they shouldn't have. I mean, well, maybe they shouldn't, I don't know. But they didn't, and it didn't hurt my feelings at all, because he wrote me the nicest note, and it was so encouraging. And he said something along the lines of, your good work is being noticed, keep it up. And, he was so encouraging. And so I say that, don't let that ever stop you. Don't ever think to yourself, well, I don't really meet the qualifications. Put yourself out there, because people will notice and people will support it and encourage.
Awesome. I think some of the encouragement, and also Dean Alonzo was talking about mentoring, has spawned some questions in the audience. We have a similar theme of mentoring, so I'm just going to select one. And this is to all panelists at large. Is there someone in your life, such as a mentor, a relative, coworker, or somebody that had a direct impact on your path? If so, how did they do this?
I'll go first on this one. My mentor is my father, and I will be fully transparent and say that my father and I do not enjoy a ideal relationship. We're civil towards each other, but I mean, after 5 or 10 minutes of speaking on the phone, it's kind of like, okay, we're ready to be done. I love my father, and I appreciate what I learned from him at a very young age. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Altus, so of those that don't know where it is, Southwest Oklahoma, go Bulldogs, 45 minutes west of Lawton. So my dad was a rancher, immigrated from Mexico at the age of 18, literally swam across the river. And I don't know how he landed up in Altus, but I'm assuming because it's agribusiness, very large in agribusiness. So I learned at a very young age the value of hard work and determination. And I know that's very cliche, but for me, I experienced that at a young age. At 10, I started during the summer when my friends were at the pool, the city pool, enjoying the pool during the horrid heat down in Southwest Oklahoma. I was working with my father on the farm starting at the age of 10. I was happy when I turned 16 because my very first job was at Brahms. Never thought I would be so excited to square dip that ice cream, but I was so excited because it got me off of the farm and into an air-conditioned facility. But my father, throughout that, he was my mentor because he stopped. He has a 7th grade education, but he is the smartest person I have ever met, and I think probably will ever meet. He knew math like I never thought someone could with a 7th grade education, because if you think about farming, that's all it is math. Math. And I never really understood how he knew complex math structures the way he did. So when I was struggling in high school, I would always turn to my father to help me with my math with the 7th grade education, and he knew it. So for me, he served as a great mentor because it truly it showed me that although you don't have a formal education, it's that informal education that can help someone sustain themselves in life. And it also helped me understand that the importance of education, and that he wanted to hand down the family farm to me, and I made it very clear that I did not want it. So, at the age of 14, 15, before I went on to have a job at Brahms, my father asked me, what do you think the likelihood is of you attending college? And this was our only conversation about college. And I said, Dad, I know it's something that's expected of me. It's something that I want to do. And he said, well, I will do whatever I can to make sure that you don't end up having a life like mine. And it kind of made me sad because I get emotional about it because my dad never missed a day of work. There were some issues with alcohol when we were younger, but he never missed a day of work. And I remember one time when he was driving the tractor. It was on a Monday after not the best Sunday, and he was really hungover. And one day he fell asleep at the wheel of the tractor. And there's irrigation canals. If you've been in Southwest Oklahoma, there's these huge irrigation canals that carry the water from the lake to the land so that you can water your crops. And he fell asleep at the wheel of the tractor. And he woke up as the front 2 wheels of the tractor were in the irrigation, and he had this 1-ton plow right behind the tractor. So where I'm going with this is that he was a hard worker, although he had his faults and his own internal demons and his own weaknesses. He was a very strong and dependent person. He knew that his boss expected him to be at work the next day, regardless of his situation. And my father realized that he had a family that he had to take care of. So for a very young age, I learned that although we may have our internal demons and our weaknesses, we have to learn how to make those into our strengths.
Thank you. This one will be for Dr. Clayton. What career mistake has given you the biggest lesson?
So where do I start? Yeah. Let me pick one. Trying to think if I can pick a recent one. This one was really powerful to me as a new dean, just because I live with the ripple effects of it, and I've shared this with a lot of folks, as Terry said, is kind of that cautionary kind of beware, be careful. So when I joined TCC as a dean, I joined a team of 3 other deans, and I joined under a different structure. For new folks, it might be news to know that those dean roles were decentralized and they're reported directly to campus provosts. But if you've been here longer than 10 years, you know that. And so they didn't report as they do to one person now. And so that put me in a style of leadership that I thought I was really equipped to handle, because I love to collaborate and engage and work together to kind of come up with the best solution. But what I really kind of underestimated was just a lot of the political aspects of what was associated with that job. And there was a particular dean that is no longer at the college, but I was frustrated about a leadership program that in theory we were all working on for students, but the reality of the program is it was benefiting one particular campus. And so we had about 3 months of discussion about how we were going to change it, and we were waiting for data to kind of show us how we could improve it. And basically my goal was I wanted to get more students involved in this thing. And long story short, we were waiting, we didn't get the data. So one meeting, and I take complete responsibility for it. I had a lunch with colleagues before, and I think you have to be careful. So I'm a person who will be an advocate, and you have to, my mentor in grad school told me you have to pick your hill to die on, and that was his way of telling me, like, and he said every fight is a righteous fight, but every fight's not yours. My hindsight was that that was a group fight. Why I decided to be the person to take that on for the group instead of saying to the rest of the group, you feel just like I do about this, so as a team, we should address this. I didn't do that. So I took that issue on myself with that person in the meeting, having been kind of egged on at lunch by colleagues. But and again, I took it on and I made it be a my issue with a person, and it just had all kinds of ripple effects. It reputationally was not good for me because it allowed that person to share a narrative of how they felt attacked and treated and that kind of thing. And that had a ripple effect, so much so that, for the next couple of years, as I would go to different campuses and interact with different people and serve on committees, they would say, like, wow, like, you're nice. And it was just like, that was difficult for me because anybody who knows me well knows that's how I am all the time. But the lesson it taught me was it wasn't about that person, it was about me. It was about me not taking the time to really consider what are the issues, taking the time to say to all of my colleagues, we ought to be accountable together, and we need to have a constructive conversation with this colleague about what we need to do. And so because I failed to do all of that, I underestimated the backlash that came my way. And I think that what you have to remember when you're passionate about something, when you feel strongly about something, is not to let that passion prevent you from going about it in a just way, in a fair way. And so, but believe you me, I made many mistakes leading up to that one, and I have made plenty of mistakes since then. Check with me tomorrow, and I will probably have one for you. I would just say this, you're gonna make mistakes, and I always say to my team, it's like, I would rather you fail forward trying to do something than to fail by just not trying to do anything at all. So that means mistakes will be made. You have to own them. You have to take responsibility, and I did apologize to that colleague one-on-one, and I apologized to that colleague in the group. I cannot say that that changed our relationship, which was already not very strong, but it didn't matter. It was the right thing to do to give her a private apology, and it was the right thing to do to give her a group apology. So.
Thank you. This next question is for Karen Harmon. What is the biggest professional risk you have ever taken? Did it pay off?
Wow. The biggest professional risk I've ever taken was making a decision to move from Tulsa to the poorest community in America and to develop a career there. All my life, I've had a sense of, and I think probably everyone sitting here, of what's unjust and what's not. And, you know, I'm with diversity and inclusion, and we think about equity, and we talk about equity all the time. I can remember, even as a child here in Tulsa growing up, I went to City of Clinton over by Northeast and Will Rogers and all of that. I remember seeing the inequity. We talk about white privilege. I was aware of that even as a little kid. I'd never heard the words, but I was aware that some kids were not being treated the way I was. And I wanted everybody to be happy like me. I had a good family life and all of those things. So when I finished college, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I'd started a master's, I decided to move to East Carroll Parish, Louisiana. At the time, National Geographic called it the last totally segregated community in America and the poorest community in America. My family did everything in the world to keep me from doing that. There were plenty of opportunities. I could have taught here. I could have done all sorts of things, but I didn't. I wanted to stay 5 years. I stayed 25. I actually retired down there in 2012 and came back home. During that time, I was a high school English teacher. I became the principal of an alternative high school. Was the first woman high school principal in Northeast Louisiana. I had to go around the school board and all that stuff and get money from the legislature and start my own school, but I did that. I was an English professor at a university. I was the head of the English department at a university. I worked at a community college there, and I retired there as a dean. What looked like at the beginning was a really, really negative thing. I have to say it's the most rewarding thing I have ever done in my life. I still have contact students who follow me on Facebook, except I never remember to look at it. So once in a while I do. With what a difference it made there. We're talking about an area that was 68% African American, average family of 4 living on $6,500 a month. There was not a McDonald's for kids to work at after school. There's no public transportation for them to go anyplace else. But with the help of the community and others who felt like we feel, I was able to take nearly 300 of those students over a period of those 25 years to Europe. Some of the poorest students in the world to Europe. We were able to bring people back, get people from the United Nations to come and do a 3-day conference with us at their expense, because what they saw, what they read, showed them that East Carroll Parish, Louisiana was a third world country. So against everyone's wishes, my mother was about to have a heart attack. My kids took them with me. They didn't want to live in the poorest community in America. I have 5, by the way. Some of them are still down there. It was an unbelievable risk at the time, but obviously I wouldn't undo one moment of it for anything. Don't be afraid to take risks. There's a reason we do those things.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the panel, or just kind of from the audience. And so this is for everybody on the panel. Everybody can jump in. What suggestions do you have when preparing for an interview? This could be either as somebody who is applying for a position or maybe even the hiring supervisor. We can do it both ways.
So I'll jump in on this one, and I referenced this earlier. Find somebody who you admire and trust and do a mock interview with them and have them ask questions and give you feedback on your responses. And I've done, not that I'm not putting myself out there as a great interviewer, but I have done this with lots of people and just provided feedback. And it can help remove a lot of the fear, I think, the trepidation going into an interview. It's a technique that I discovered several years ago, and it just helps you hone your responses. It helps you hone your language and your reactions that can set you apart or not. And so I just strongly recommend that technique of finding someone who you trust and admire, who can provide some solid feedback in almost a role play situation.
Thank you.
I don't know, like, is this thing on? Like, can you all really hear us with the, oh, okay. I was like, I keep pulling it, like, it's like this false sense of, ooh, my voice on a microphone. I would add to Eileen, definitely do your homework. Know who you're going to interview with. Sometimes I have called ahead when I know it's a panel interview and just ask, may I have the names of all the folks on there? And I'll tell you what I do. I start thank you cards before the interview, so I address them out and I write the names of everybody there. And then as I'm going through the interview, I might write 1 or 2 questions that they ask me. And so as soon as that interview is over, I write thank you cards and mail them. And sometimes I will send an email. Like, I remember when I interviewed for this position, they asked me, what would people I supervise say about me? And it just so happened that a person that I supervised almost 7 years ago had emailed me and said, you know, I just want to thank you, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at Raven, because you got that. She was on the committee, and she got it. So before they got actual thank you cards, I thanked them again for taking the time to meet with me, and I forwarded that email from that person who could say it much better than I could. So it was, this is who I am, not who I tell you I am, but this is who people really say and see that I am. So I'd say do your homework, know who you're going to interview with, have your thank you cards ready, either via email or old school way is through the mail, and I still do through the mail because I don't think there's anything like that personal touch. Definitely do the mock interview. Make sure that what you have on is very comfortable. You can sit in it, bend in it, you know, practice your posture. Don't have any gum. Talk to everybody coming in. So whoever the custodian is, whoever the administrative assistant is, whoever the students are, everybody on your way into that interview, speak to them, you know, greet them, all of those types of things. And then have your questions. They should give you time to ask questions. Think about that. Prepare those questions. I love it when I get the opportunity to ask a question and they're like, that's a good question. I'm like, you had all those good questions for me. Now I have a good question for you. So have your questions ready. I love interviewing, like I really do. Like I love that thing. Like that energizes me. So I do it a lot just because I love it and I want to make sure that I am marketable always. So those would be the tips. And again, I would say I'm happy to talk to anybody after this. Be the person that does mock interviews with you and for you, all of that.
Okay, can I jump in real quick? For someone who's as energetic as Harriet, I think that's awesome. But I am not there, okay? So I am not like Harriet, and I struggle with interviews because I'm an introvert, and part of the reason, and I have a hard time talking about myself and making that sound good. I'm not very eloquent about that. So I've had to practice a little bit, but I've also had to really write down everything that I've accomplished, because I get to that interview and I kind of freeze and I forget to say and make myself really paint the picture of myself that, you know, I've actually done these things. I'm a professional, and here's all the things that I've accomplished. And I've had feedback. So remember I said earlier I made mistakes in my career. So I've gone to interviews and I have failed, and I've gotten feedback about those failures, and then I took that to heart and said, okay, I've got to really make myself shine. Because I had colleagues who were on the panels who afterwards said, but you didn't talk about this and this and this that you've done. And so it just my personality, and so I had to overcome that and try to get better at it. So practice a lot.
I'm just going to jump in real quickly. So Terry Alonso, those were not failures. And honestly, I mean, those words matter. It was something that it just didn't work at that moment, but everything worked out really well. So I think that was not a failure for you. It just did not happen in that moment.
Thank you. The next question we have is for Shelley. How do you choose who to promote and why?
Oh, wow, that's, a lot of that's, I will say a lot of times I go with my gut, and that develops over time. That's not something I had when I was younger. I think the biggest thing, you can learn almost any job, but you can't, I don't know if it was Jan, integrity, that's something you can't fake it. And so I'm looking for someone who has a lot of integrity, someone who is always questioning, why do we do it this way? Do you think we could do it a different way? I want somebody that's gonna come forward and make that job better and bring up their person. I don't want somebody that leaves dead bodies in their wake. I've worked for those bosses over the years, and it's horrible. It's horrible. And you can't repair, you can correct mistakes. You know, one of the bosses I had at one time had said I had to file these monthly regulatory reports, and I had to sign my name to them, and these went to the U.S. government. And he said, don't be afraid to make a mistake. You can always go back and amend that report, but don't make a mistake and don't own it, you know, and don't say anything. So always be willing to make a mistake and be honest about it, and always willing to learn and want to continue to ask questions of how to do something better.
Thank you. We'll go next door to Dean Beatty. In what ways is student affairs making a difference in the world?
Oh my goodness, I could talk about this all day long. So student affairs, you know, I mean, it's totally where my heart is, and I know it's where the heart of all of us up on this panel. You know, we are changing lives every day by the impact we make on students, and I could tell you story after story, as everyone up here could, of students who have walked into our offices or come to our counter, and they are hurting, or they need to be energized, or they need to be encouraged, or they need someone to just love on them for a little bit. And I think all of us in student affairs have that heart, that we just want to help people and make things better for them. And if you think about, you know, all of us in this room, the number of students who we've made a real difference in their lives, you know, maybe we told them that you only have one more class to graduate, or maybe we've told them your Pell Grant is going to come through, it's going to be okay. Or maybe we've told them, you know what, that was a mistake you made, but let's talk through that and see how you can approach that differently next time. And those are life skills that we are making a difference in for those people. And so to say that student affairs, I mean, we're just changing the world in huge ways because we are shaping and instilling belief and empowering the people with whom we work every day. And then they leave here, they leave our doors, and they go out and make the world a better place by the way that we have made them feel, by how we've treated them, and the things that we've extended ourselves to do for them.
Thank you. Dr. Clayton, kind of continuing off of that same question, how has our field changed since you initially entered student affairs, and what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
So you're just going to give me all the old people questions. Is what's
I was going for the historical reference since I know you like history.
back in my day, we were using mimeographs. And I mean, I think that's a great question. And I mean, anybody who knows me knows I'm not going to resist the opportunity to put my historian hat on for a minute and just say, and I know Hutch knows this, and just talk about the profession and how the profession developed. And I also want to say to the room, it's important that as I'm talking about student affairs right now, I'm talking about student affairs with a lower S and a lower A. So the profession of student affairs, if you look at ACPA, if you look at NASPA, encompasses all of these broad areas. So enrollment management, all of that is an umbrella. Now, structurally at our college, we have a division of enrollment management and student affairs, so we have those offices, but it's important to know it's a collective, and the reason why you need to know that is our profession exists for one reason and one reason only, and that is to advocate for students. Prior to the development of this profession, when you look at the history of higher education, it was divided into the academy, and it was divided into the governance structure, which was sometimes directly tied to the academy. And then what we had developed is the business side of the college. What we did not have was a student arm. And so the profession itself starts to emerge in the 20s and the 30s in individual pockets around the country. But basically by the 50s, 60s, it's a full-fledged profession. I'm looking at some of my NASPA lovers out here, Cassie Steele and David Adams, who could probably jump in and give you some specific bullets and key things that happened. But I think that the job of student affairs has always been to be responsive to students, to advocate for students, be the voice of students. Why it's always going to change is because students are always going to change. So what the focuses need to be are always going to change. So in the 50s, the focuses were how to get people who had a new thing called a GI Bill into education and training, and that was the student affairs focus. In the 60s and 70s, it was an era of systemic protest across the country for a range of things: women's rights, the beginning of LGBTQIA rights, civil rights, and so it was the role of student affairs to navigate all of that. In the 80s and 90s, it was about access, and as we know, we're in an era now where it's about completion, it's about student success, and so we constantly evolve as a profession because we follow the students. That's our constituency.
Thank you. Dean Delacruz. So we have all, not just to pick on you just because you also do conduct, but I think we all know that we've talked a lot about the love, but there's not always just every single day is a good day sort of situation. So many of us come across difficult students or colleagues, difficult policies that sometimes make it harder to feel all the love. So what has been your most challenging moment while you've been in student affairs?
And the long pause is not because there are so many, but I think the biggest challenge for me personally has been, well, the sheer complexity, I guess it is complex, of the work that we do. No day is the same because every student is different. And no situation is the same because different variables impact situations differently. which results in a different outcome. So I think for me, I have a very steep learning curve in this position. I'm coming up on 3 years in April, but I am still learning every single day. I'm fortunate to have colleagues that have been in the profession for a lot longer than I have, and I turn to their expertise on certain situations to kind of see how they would handle the situation and see how it differs from how I would. And then I share how I would handle it and let them offer critique on that because they are more knowledgeable in the field. So it's just, and then also what makes it complex is just the effect that federal and state level legislation and regulations have on our students. We're in very challenging times, and I think that is showing up on our campuses. So I think that's all, I'm adding a layer of complexity to the work that we do. And then also it's, I found recently I'm starting to struggle with balancing work and life. So my previous employer, my previous boss, Gina, she was before she retired and went to the VA to work, she served as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and she, when I think I reported to her for 4.5 years, and then she retired, and then I reported to Daniel Archer for the remainder of my 6 years. And she had a horrible work-life balance, and she recognized that. There were times where I'd be up working on my graduate work, and I'd get an email from her at 3 in the morning. Why I was checking my work email at 3 in the morning was also an issue. But I think it's just the complexity of the work that we do sometimes can drown us if we're not careful.
Thank you. This question is for the panel at large. What is the importance of obtaining advanced degrees to pursue a career in student affairs?
So I am going to take this from the perspective of gender and ethnicity. In 2004, I talked earlier about the American Association for Community Colleges. It's the national umbrella for community colleges. And I was sent to the National Institute for Leadership Development. And since then, so that was one for all women. Then I went to Kaleidoscope. That was one for all women of color. And then I went to Leadership Development Institute, and that was specifically for African Americans. And I send a plug because they do it every year. So I'm looking at some folks in the audience that I also say every year you should go to that. But I would encourage anybody in here, there's Leadership Development Institutes that cover our specific content being professionals in community colleges. And I can tell you without a doubt, at every single one of those institutes, they always stress that that is your calling card. You don't aspire to move up if you don't complete the doctorate. We are in the field of education, and so the terminal degree is really the calling card. Now again, it may be specific to gender and ethnicity, but I would just say, because I represent female, I represent as African American or Black first, and then female second, pronouns she, her, hers, that has been very important for me to move up. It's opened so many doors you don't know. I've gone to places and been the first Black there, like in 2014, in North Carolina, Central Piedmont, Charlotte, where the student population was like 95%. And the reason I got the job is because I had the doctorate. And so then after I got in and worked, then it opened the door for some other folks that came behind me. And I know this because I was told that. So I've been told several times that I got into either the running or in the door because I had that. So I would just say, know your trajectory, know where you're planning to go, and then know what the calling card is. And for community colleges and higher ed, And this is on the academic affairs side, so I would defer to Jose and Dr. Clayton, the soon-to-be Dr. Jose De La Cruz, and Dr. Clayton to talk about how important it is on the student affairs side.
I mean, I think the answer to degree or not to degree really does depend on what you want to do in terms of what your interests are going to be. If you were just to look at the system as a whole and what's happening, you can see that, one, student affairs has really become genderized, and it's gone the exact opposite direction it was about 25, 30 years ago. There are more women in student affairs now than there are men in student affairs. The other thing that's happened is it has diversified in terms of race and ethnicity, although there's still more growth that needs to happen on that front. But it is also diversified in terms of age. So I chair the Council on Student Affairs, which is the Regent's supported organization for all of the chief student affairs officers in the state of Oklahoma, public and private. And when I look around, we have a horseshoe table. And when I look around the horseshoe table, the demographics versus when I was sitting out in the audience with my boss 25 years ago, I mean, are literally the opposite. When I was sitting out in that audience 25 years ago, everybody around that table was an older white male, age 50 or higher. Now I look around that table and there are people, and they're the senior student affairs officers for their college. There are people who are in their early 30s around that table. And so there's a big shift that's going on, and those individuals are coming in degreed because a lot of people are choosing to stay in school and complete all the way through. So it really depends on the kind of role that you're interested in and what you need to do related to that role. But the degree does get you in the door, but I see a lot of people, I've got colleagues who step back, who've said, you know, I don't want to get the degree, and I think I want to finish out kind of where I am doing this. I might do it at a different institution or in a different area of the college, but this is kind of where I want to stay. It really does, I mean, the answer really does depend on what you are seeing for yourself individually, what you need to be doing. If you're looking at an area where it's highly competitive and most of the people you're competing against have the degrees, you're going to have the degree more likely than not, unless you can demonstrate that you have enough comparable experience and, you know, and somebody's willing to see it. Because certain institutions, it really doesn't matter. They're very, and that's why you have to know the institution. Certain institutions, you can have all that experience, but they're very specific about they want degreed individuals for whatever reason. Other institutions, your experience may carry a lot of weight, and you may be able to leverage that. So, you know, so much of it, again, just depends on what your individual desire is for leadership, where you want to advance to, and what the playing field looks like.
Thank you. We're going to take another question from our audience. What is one mistake you witness leaders making more frequently than others?
I'll answer that. I think sometimes I see, and I see this probably more younger sometimes, not delegating, not allowing their employees to take on
It's really good.
objects. They feel like they have to do everything, and I don't think that's a good leader. I think that's something everybody starts out with, that concept, but a good leader's going to let your people do things and not try to do all of it themselves.
Does anybody else think of any mistakes that leaders make more frequently than anybody else?
I think if you blame your people instead of taking responsibility for it. And so, you know, I think when that happens, that ultimately affects morale. And, you know, I'll never forget, Tom McKeon did this several years ago when I came into this role. we were in a really bad place as far as financial aid was concerned. There were a lot of federal changes that had come down the pike. There were some technological issues that we were having as a college, and we were in a position where we were not going to be able to disperse financial aid in a timely manner. And, you know, when we realized it, we scrambled and we ran to, and Dora's going, oh, I remember it, we ran to the solutions as quickly as we could. But again, we were really going to have to tell students the absolute worst thing, which was best case scenario, we could start to get them financial aid by November, December. So I remember sitting in a meeting with the president, and he talked about the communication we needed to develop for the college and the one for the students and some of the things he wanted in it. And so I'm taking notes down, and I'm like, you know, I will have a draft back to you in the next couple of hours. And so I said to him, you know, once I have the draft and things ready to go, do I just need to put my name on it and send it from, and he looked at me and he said, no, you're not going to put your name on it, you're going to put my name on it. And I said, but I mean, this isn't your area. And even for me, I had inherited it. And so there's the lesson, right? Because I could have been like, this is something that somebody else did and I have to fix it. But he said, no, you're going to put my name on it. And I kind of said to him, but I mean, that wasn't you. And he said, I'm the leader of the college. And at the end of the day, it comes back to me. And that was so powerful to me, of just literally watching leadership in action in the middle of a crisis, of him just saying, nope, that's me, put my name down, let's get this thing out and ready to go.
And I would just first, I want to apologize. I'm supposed to be on a conference call at 2:30, so when you see me get up and leave, that's why. So I respectfully raised the finger, and the right finger, you know, not the other finger, so that I can leave. But what I wanted to add was creating a culture of work-life balance. You heard Dr. De La Cruz, I'm so excited about this, mention or allude to earlier this creating a culture of work-life balance. So when a leader does not set the culture that we're not going to send emails after 5 o'clock, or I do want you to take the whole weekend off and not have a project that you're working on, or how can I carve out time for you to do that, or be open to you having that. All of which I might add, my boss does those things.
I was about to apologize, sorry.
No, she does, and she calls Jose out too. Like, Jose, if I respond to this email, that means that I acknowledge that you're sending emails when you're supposed to be off. So I would say that's one too. When a leader does not create a culture of work-life balance, and then everybody under them feels like, well, if they're sending emails, I should be responding, or if they're working this late and this hard, I should be as well. And if they're skipping lunch, I should be as well.
Thank you. This next one is for Dean Alonzo. To what do you attribute the success you've had in your leadership positions?
Okay, I think that I would go to my mentors who, back from Res Life, and who've really motivated me. I also think that I try really hard not to forget that I used to be an academic advisor. I used to be a brand new academic advisor. I worked in the registrar's office. At the time it was registrar, and I did the work of the group that I'm now part of, making decisions on some of the things they do in their work. So that helps me to stay, you know, I guess, focused and balanced, and know that it keeps me going, to motivate me to want to do the best job in my position. And the staff that I have reporting to me, the 4 directors that are now hired, 2 of them are over there. Thanks for coming. Just helping to stay connected with them, and have them give me feedback to keep me on my toes and keep me in line and in check with what's happening. So those are things that I strive to do. I also strive to work with colleagues across, and like Eileen and Karen Harmon and programs in their areas, and encourage my staff to do the same. And because in student life as well, Bursar, all of us have to work together in order to meet the end goal that we're all here to do, which is help students succeed. So all of that combined, I guess.
Okay, this is for the whole panel. So kind of a reoccurring theme from some of the stories you all have been telling that I think can very easily be mirrored by our audience is very few of us, if any, when we were students in college or even younger, thought we were going to be here in student affairs today and that this would be our life's path. So if you were not in student affairs, what would you be doing?
I know. I would want to have a cooking show on TV. Or baking, or whatever.
I would probably be either a children's librarian or a gardener.
I actually started out to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. Along the way, I had some wonderful professors. If you're going into law, you have to take a lot of English, and I had a couple of amazing English professors, and through the literature, and so specifically the authors who had been through a lot of the same kinds of things I was interested in, I changed to English and education. Again, my family was not happy.
So I would be two things. I'd be a greeter, put me anywhere. I used to say Walmart, but that's not real popular. So I would just be a greeter, like just put me at the door and just let me greet people all day long. And the other thing I would do is teach. I used to teach Zumba. I love dance. I love fitness. My goal is to do gospel aerobics. If you've ever been to the black church, you know we do a lot of eating on Sundays. We don't necessarily do a lot of working out afterwards. So my other big thing is I would like to teach gospel aerobics.
Yeah, I want to have my peach cobbler in peace, so I'm not gonna take her gospel aerobics after I eat that at church. But two things for me. I wanted to be, before I met my husband, I wanted to work in international relations. So I would ideally be working in an embassy or a consulate overseas somewhere. And if I wasn't doing that, this is more of a dream. I would like to be a writer.
For me, prior to entering the profession of higher education, I served as a chemical dependency counselor with minors that were part of the juvenile system. 9 months of that quickly convinced me that that was not the profession for me. So that led me to all of our conversations centered on the importance of education. And a lot of the students that I had, I call them students because they were high school students at that time. A lot of the Latino students had undocumented parents. So I also had the conversation of what their behavior, the impact their behavior could have on their parents from a deportation perspective. So I quickly realized that although I enjoyed the profession and it was rewarding, it was not a perfect fit for me, and it always came back to higher education, the importance of education. So I took the first opportunity to become an academic advisor, and that led up to where I am today.
Well, I think I like to investigate problems, so I would have to do something related to that. I just like to figure out why this happened. And then part-time, I think I would want to hold babies somewhere, like in a hospital. I love babies.
And if I was still in the corporate world, I worked in insurance and securities, brokerage securities for 30 years. So that's probably where I'd be, but I always wanted to own a coffee shop, so. Make people happy.
One more thing.
I do want to say, though, that my very first day at TJC, I walked into Metro Campus, and I was being introduced to everyone in the building. And when I was introduced to Dean Bill Stevenson, who was the Dean of Student Services at the time, his office was up on the 6th floor in the corner. And when I was introduced to him on my first day, I was a year out of graduate school, and I said to him, I want to be you one day. And so I think about that so often, that even though, I joke about what I'd like to do, my very first day here, September 23rd, 1991, I said, I really want to have your job one day. So I feel like I'm living the dream, really.
Well, panel members, we're going to wrap up in just a little bit and do something a little non-traditional. But we had an audience member who was thinking actually right along the same lines as the committee putting questions together. So we will go with a fun one on the way out. And that is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
To read minds. Mind reading, that would be really nice.
Might be helpful in conduct a little bit.
And money.
Say speed reading and answering emails.
For me, it would be the gift of invisibility, because I think
You didn't raise your hand when you said you were an introvert, by the way.
because I think there would be a lot of benefits from having the ability to sneak into certain situations, certain meetings, and not be noticed. So the gift of invisibility.
So your invisibility would come and go at will, then?
Yeah, kind of like a cloak, but yeah.
Do any of our other panel members wish that they had a certain superpower?
I'd like to be in more than one place at one time. That'd be helpful.
And I would say, for me, ignorance is bliss, so I don't want some of those skills there. I don't want to know. And I would have said flying, but as I'm getting older, I think I have a little vertigo, so it's not going to be that. So I'm going to go with, the ability to, suspend time or do something with it. But, I don't want to be suspended in the time. I want to suspend the time for everybody else. Go to the beach, go take a nap, do some reading, and then start it back up, and then it's, yeah.
So I'm thinking too, one is this whole Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. When it's the nice me, it's really the nice me. But then when it's the other me that is holding people accountable and having to, what do you call it, Lynette, when you send me a case to adjudicate? Yeah, that word. So then I could be the other person, but then when you see me again, you don't know me as that person. You just know me as the nice girl guy. And then the other one is kind of like Superman. You know how Superman flies and then they save people? I want to fly in right before they withdraw and not know that they're going to have to pay it back, some financial aid. I want to fly right in and save them right there. Don't do it. I want to fly in right before they stop out of that class. I'll be like, don't do it. Stay there. I want to fly in right before they enroll for that class that they know, that load of 18 hours that they know they're not going to be able to take, and save them from it. So those are the two I want.
Hopefully you're Dr. Jekyll when you fly in.
And I really would like to be able to read people's minds. I'd like to know behind all the smiles exactly what really is going on. Wouldn't you like to know what she's thinking most of the time? There's always a smile there.
Not at all.
Well, what we're going to do as we wrap up, first and foremost, I want to give a warm thank you and round of applause to our panel members. And I'm going to continue that on because we had great audience participation. I know it's busy. It's a busy time of year for all of us. And you all could have been in your office doing a myriad of things. And so thank you for coming and participating. What we'll do next, we actually, as time allows, we had this scheduled until 3, but what we would like to do, we have refreshments in the back. I had some great questions that were up here, but I know there are some questions that people didn't ask. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of have a mingling time. So invite the panel members to join us for some refreshments, and if you have any questions that you want to ask, whether it be one-on-one or in a group, or perhaps you want to hit them up later and make it more private. I also am going to do shameless plugs. You all have in your email some of our other events going on for Careers and Student Affairs Month. It's not over just yet, but please remember to sign up for the Quality Time for Careers in Mind. That's going to be amazing. That's one-on-one designated time with you and one of our college leaders that I would just stress is invaluable to be able to share that time with them. So please sign up. There's still some spots left. Also, don't forget, if you want funding, we actually have up to $700 available, and we put that in the email as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and happy Student Affairs Month.
Great job, Coach.